looking forward to getting into the album. It's a wonderful story. I appreciate you taking a minute out today.
Sure, man. Absolutely. Cool background. Love
Thank
it.
you. Yeah, I'm a visual artist, so it's one of my originals. I just turned it into the logo.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, so I'm in Kansas City, so that's downtown Kansas City. And the
Very cool.
oversized Godzilla jazz cats blasting everybody, which is great.
I love it, man.
It's
That's
cool,
very
man.
cool. I like all the different colors on the building and everything.
Thank you. I appreciate it,
Mhm.
man.
Yeah.
Well, let's hop into it, man. Before we get into the album, when we get into your history, I want to know this. 5 years ago, this pandemic was rearranging everybody, everything that we were doing, especially musicians. How did you get through that era, and how did it influence the way that you approach music and even this album?
Wow. Um, yeah, a lot happened, man. Pandemic. So I was okay. Right before the pandemic started, I had moved to Madrid, back to Spain, and was going to be there for a few years. I was living in Madrid. I think I got there like January 5th or something like that, or maybe even the 1st. Um, and so, I had got a place rented out for the year, the whole deal. Had concerts booked. Was sort of combining a performance, stint with also I was doing some studying. I wanted to do some studying Spanish poetry stuff at the University of the Complutense in Madrid. So I had all this stuff set up for the next few years, and then the pandemic hit, and it hit Madrid really hard with Rome. I don't know if you remember, it was they were kind of the first two cities
Yeah,
that were just, I mean, it was like a Hitchcock film.
yeah.
um, you couldn't walk down the street. You're only allowed to be on the street if you were going to the grocery store, and you had to go to the grocery store that was right on your block. And it was, it was way scarier there than it felt here, at least. Anyway, so I remember I played a performance in like, I think it was like March 5th or something, and then the entire country shut down. And um, I lasted, I don't know, another several weeks, month or something like that, and then figured, I needed to get back to the States and back to family here and everything. So came right back to LA, told my wife that we needed to get out of the city. Um, and I had already wanted to move out towards the Ventura area, whatnot. So we moved to Camarillo, which is where Charlie Parker wrote that standard, "Relaxing at Camarillo."
Yeah.
Yeah, so we moved out here. We actually moved exactly to the plot of land that he was at, which was in the past was a center of it's kind of like a rehab center, and also mental health facility. Was the biggest, I think it was the biggest one in the country. And so this whole plot of land where I still live is all kind of mountains in Camarillo, and it turned into CSU purchased the land lease from what was the previous state hospital.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that's where I live. Um, and the pandemic, yeah, I mean, we basically holed up here in Camarillo in these mountains the whole time. And for work, it was a combination of classes, some Zoom teaching, that kind of stuff. I did do a lot of recording, a lot of writing during that time. I think a lot of musicians, especially the writers, did, tons of writing, tons of, of recording ideas and laying out, session demos and all that. And then for a lot of the income stuff, I actually started to work in another passion of mine quite a bit, which is wine. And I got heavily active with the winery scene up in Santa Barbara wine country and whatnot. So, just waited it out, man, and did what everyone else did, I think, really. But
Yeah.
but writing wise, I mean, massive amounts of composing during the whole pandemic. I mean, just stupid amounts of
Yeah.
writing.
Well, that's a natural lead into the blues around us. Talk to me about this album and what the vision was and just how good it feels on a visceral level to have this.
Yeah. It's a long process to get to this specific record that we did. Chano and I have known each other for, I don't know, 10, 11 years. Um, he really wanted to record a blues record specifically. He was either interested in it being vocal led or instrumental. I lobbied for the instrumental side. It took a long time for us to sort of hone in on exactly how it was going to come out and what it would be. Whether it would be kind of more Delta bluesy or whether it would be, stride piano or what it would be, and eventually it turned into a jazz blues quartet, seemed like the right path for it. So we're both really happy with it. I think the overall objective on the record was that we tried to bring back some kind of essential sound in recordings, in jazz recordings that we both feel are have been lost and are getting harder and harder to find in newer albums, which, what makes those sounds, what makes those vibes in those records is a mystery. If someone knew the answer to that, then, apart from the musicians that are on the records, everything, right? The way the session is run, the way the whatever level of planning or strategic, pre-production goes into the actual session, what kind of charts are used, how complicated the charts are, who plays the sessions, who engineers the sessions, what kind of micing's on the sessions, are the instrument ranges thought out at all, or is it just happening in the moment? I mean, there's just so much, is there editing after the session or not? Nowadays, is there punching or not punching? Is there overdubbing? So all of that information was thought about ahead of time. And we probably spent a year. I definitely led that charge because I'm having a real hard time, as good as the modern jazz records are, at just wanting to turn them on over and over and over again and make a coffee and turn on a modern jazz record and have a dinner party and turn on a modern jazz record. It's like there's something happening in the last 25 years in the recordings that they just keep getting colder and colder and colder, in my opinion. Not all of them, but the majority. And, it makes sense because it's so easy for us to make these records, so easy for us to edit them, so easy for us to make them sound absolutely perfect. And that's not what those old records sounded like.
Yeah.
At all. They had like spirits in those records. I mean, those records sound alive. They sound like they're still alive. You put them on, they sound like they're alive. It sounds like the spirits of the people are in them. It sounds like the spirits in the harmonics are in them. It sounds like the frequency spirits are in those records. And it's not just analog. I don't think, people argue that it's the analog versus the digital. And I think that's a part of it, no question. But it's not just that. There's more. There's how the session pans out, what the strategy for what's recorded is, what that was. Do you edit? Do you not? Obviously, don't edit or don't overdub, and leave some of the imperfections in. There's a balance. It can't sound awful, but you can leave stuff in there that's a mistake. That can be a contradiction in modern recording as well, which is that you can't leave mistakes in when the rest of the album sounds like a pristine, perfectly polished $150,000 vehicle.
Yeah.
So then you can't leave the mistakes in because those mistakes sound absolutely so out of place that the whole thing is awful. So in order to be able to sound imperfect and have human elements in the recording, the whole thing has to have that vision.
Yeah.
And that's how I hear those old records. That's my favorite recordings, all my favorite, players, everything has some mistakes in it and has humanity in it, human imperfections. And I think that's why there's life in those records still, apart from the genius that's in the playing and the writing. And so that's a big part of this record is what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
And apart from what we played, apart from, how incredible Chano is as a player, how amazing his reach is, I think, to have him sound quirky and funky like Monk in one moment and then have him run the gamut all the way over to classical Spanish meets flamenco type lines. It's pretty out there.
Yeah.
That's pretty out there, man. It's not an easy thing to do. He spent 50 years working on that. He obviously has a natural talent for that, but to sound authentic in multiple deep genres is very hard to do. And so I really respect that out of him. I wrote the record thinking of that and knowing how he played. So I composed it specifically for how I thought he would interpret over it. He asked me to do that. That was his request. He said, I think you need to bring these styles, all these styles that and since you have such a deep relationship with Spain and lived there and all that stuff, you put them together and let's do an American sounding jazz blues record with all these other underpinnings that are so different. Um, so that's what all went into it, and I stressed the sonic side because at least on my end specifically, it was a really important part of the record was really trying to figure out, how to give it a classic sounding vibe that, people want to turn on over and over again and makes people feel good when they are sitting at home and turn on a tune. That was important.
So ultimately, speaking of, what are you hoping the listener gets from this album?
Just a good man, honestly, just I hope that the good vibe is the obvious part. I hope they can turn it on and I hope it feels good to them on a cellular level, not just in their ears, you know. Um, I also hope that there's enough in the record between the foundation and what you hear on the surface that opens people's brains up and goes, wow, okay, this is a dominant blues, but this is very different as well. It's never been played quite like this one. There's rhythm patterns in a lot of these tunes. There's a Louisiana blues, minor blues funeral march over a pretty complicated flamenco rhythm that's also very African based. That's really different. In some ways it's called March of the Cigarillas, and that one sounds like a minor blues, kind of Louisiana, kind of a march procession thing, but it's got some pretty interesting hits, and therefore the way that the solos move through it and what Carlos is playing on bass and what Obed's playing on the drums is very unique. I don't think that you're going to hear that. I don't think you've heard that before. There's another piece called Sweet Street Blues, which once again, that's played over a flamenco rhythm called the soleá, but we meshed it with a shuffle Afro-Caribbean rhythm, which is what Obed plays. Carlos plays the more flamenco accented bass line that I wrote for that piece. And then Chano's free over that. He's very free because he's able to play US based, blues. He's able to play Afro-Caribbean stuff, Cuban type stuff if he wants. And he's able to sit over the accenting patterns that are foundations of flamenco. So, I hope that people's minds, even though this is a lot of straightforward sounding harmony in the record, I hope that their brains can open up a little bit to that there's still potential out there to do more, and to open up traditional material more and more and more.
So how did you and Chano, how did you guys hook up?
Um, Originally in a concert that we played together.
Yeah.
Yeah, in LA. I I've got maybe a 26 or 25, 26 year relationship with Spain, very close all the time there. I've also lived there for about 12 years. But we didn't really hook up there. Um, we were just in very different scenes. He was in the jazz scene and I was in a very, very roots Roma artist kind of Delta blues scenario, almost like it was like Helena, Arkansas or Clarksdale, Mississippi or something. And that's why I was there. And that's all I was doing. So I wasn't paying attention to any Spanish jazz. There's amazing Cuban artists there I wasn't paying attention to. Jerry Gonzalez was there, and piano player I love named Caramelo was there, still there. Alain Perez is there. I wasn't paying attention to any of that, and it wasn't because I didn't like it. It just, that's not where my mind was. So when I got back to the States, started a quintet, and then started to do some of these concerts that were very much jazz meets flamenco meets blues, all that kind of thing. Chano, is very obvious. He was the obvious selection to play along or to collaborate with if he was interested. I had no idea if he would be or not. So I think I reached out to him, originally, and sent him some music and just said, look, this is what I'm involved with. If you ever have an interest to do some of this stuff or to work on some things, be more than happy to talk about it and to try to make it happen.
Yeah.
And no idea how he was going to respond. He's not like, he doesn't like play as a supporting. He doesn't play as like a sideman really. So I didn't know, but I also thought, hey, maybe he'll hear something, and if he wants it for one of his projects, maybe, I just figured it was worth a shot, and he responded really, really fast, and I think also he was a big fan also of like Mahavishnu Orchestra and bands like that as well, and I, at the time, I was playing a lot with Mitchell Foreman, a piano player who was in Mahavishnu and played a lot with McLaughlin, and so there was some overlaps that were cool. And yeah, we got together, did that concert, and right at that first concert, it was a theater concert. I think we immediately realized like, wow, there's a big connection here.
Yeah.
And that's also when you play with someone for 2 hours or whatever, you start to really realize how authentic their drive is for what they're doing. Sometimes you don't know that. I mean, a lot of musicians say, "Oh, I've dabbled in this, dabbled in that, dabbled in it," and from a perspective like maybe myself or maybe like Chano's or someone. Chano spent 50 years. I spent 26 years trying to really work out genre meshing in a way that feels really natural. It's not a gimmick. And so over the years, you play with a lot of people who've gotten into it as kind of just more of a like, oh, I'm just going to dabble a little bit and play a few scales in here and say that I do it,
Yeah.
So when you feel the authenticity from a musician like Chano in there, or it's totally different.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't even need to speak about almost anything. You just go. And if you play a swing rhythm, it's a swing rhythm. If you play a Sigurdia's rhythm, it becomes that. You play a 12/8 shuffle and it's a soleá mixed with a Cuban thing, it's that. And you don't need to say it. It's happening and it's being played and everybody's in.
Yeah.
So it's pretty different, and I think like 6 months later or something, he reached out and he was just like, man, we really got to do more together. And then, we continued to talk. And then several years later, he said, why don't you put together a blues record, jazz blues record, and let's record it, and so I had to figure out what he meant because I wasn't, really trying to write a classic sounding blues record at the time.
Yeah.
Those aren't really that's not really how you tour nowadays.
Yeah.
As much as I love the blues, I've recorded a lot of blues and I love to sing the blues and play the blues, but that doesn't get you gigs really,
Yeah.
and it doesn't make any money on the recordings. So I had to wrap my brain around it for a while. And then we just did it.
So are you guys going to play together? Are you guys got any plans on tour, shows, anything coming up?
There were actually several concerts already set up here in the U.S., but some things happened, unfortunately, in his family, and we had to pull off of those. That was all for this fall. So hopefully, next year, maybe in the fall, we get more stuff together. I'm supposed to be in Spain in January, so we might do a few things out there. It's a little more feasible to do them in Spain,
Yeah,
than it is here, obviously.
yeah,
All the visa requirements, everything that's going on now with all the immigration, requirements, everything are pretty complicated.
yeah,
It's a scary thing for when you're an international artist like him and you come to the US, you do all these interviews before you go. And you have to have the tour set up, you have to have all the paperwork done, you have to have like paid the thousands and thousands of dollars application fees, all that stuff. And you go to these interviews, and the interviews sometimes only happen like a week before the flight leaves.
yeah.
So if you go to an interview, like in Madrid, he goes from Barcelona to Madrid, goes to an interview, and something they say, well, it's not going to work right now. The tour falls apart. You lose the application money. You lose the plane tickets. I mean, it's crazy,
Wow.
Yeah, it seems like, all that stuff should happen 3 months ahead of time.
Yeah, sure.
Right. So, I don't know that the public really understands that. It's a very risky thing to do when you get these international artists that come over here and And sometimes they don't make it. They get denied, and then the whole tour just tanks.
Yeah.
And it's scary.
Yeah.
And if you're in a genre like jazz where there's just not a lot of money in it, you can't really afford to lose like $6,000 on a tour budget.
Yeah. Totally. I totally get it. So this is the Unifying Sounds debut, The Blues Around Us. If anybody wants to get a copy, any of the other good news going on in your collective worlds, where do people go?
Yeah, man. Yeah. I think, mostly social media stuff. Instagram is probably pretty good for both of us. So his is like official Chano Domínguez, I think, oficial in Spanish. Mine's my artist name, which is Emaginario.
Yeah.
EMAG. So yeah, they go to that on Instagram. There's stuff happening. Yeah, I'm gonna release another thing in December, which is totally different. It's super contemporary and edgy and risky. It's called Flamenco Drums, and it's a hardcore, fast moving jazz piece featuring the drums. Gary Novak plays the drums on it. Larry Grenadier's on bass. So I'm excited to do that because that's a really crazy drum piece.
Yeah.
So that'll come out December 5th. And, Channel's doing a lot. And, hopefully next year we'll be able to do more around the record for performance. Yeah.
Cool. Well, I will put all these links in the show notes. Ethan, this has been absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much for taking a minute out today. I look forward to profiling it on the show, man.
Right on. Sounds good, man. Cool. Thank you for doing it. Yeah.
Yes, sir.